I think what is missing from so many of the work-life balance conversations, and what the media gets wrong about all of this too, of like, oh, nobody wants to work anymore and we're just lazy and all of these things. It's that like, we are human beings and none of us asked to be here. None of us opted into being in this society at this point in time, right?
No, we did not. Mm-mm.
And we are entitled to enjoying our human experience and getting to live our lives. We do not have to earn it. And anybody who says that you do need to earn it and that if you are struggling, then it's a you problem is because you haven't worked that hard is like really internalizing the capitalism and the patriarchy and white supremacy and all of these things that tell us that we will never be enough and that we are never doing enough. Like we are all already enough. Our career should express the very best parts of us. And we cannot get in touch with the very best parts of us because the media is filtering all this bullshit about what we're supposed to want, what we're supposed to feel, and what we're supposed to do.
Welcome to It Gets Late Early. Today, I have a really special guest. I have Danielle Roberts, who is the anti-career coach. And on this show, we've had a few career coaches, but no anti-career coaches. So I'm really excited to have you here and see what you have to say. So welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So glad you're here. So what is an anti-career coach?
So no shade to regular career coaches. I think they do wonderful work, but in the career coaching space, there's a lot of people who want to help you find your dream job. And as an anti-career coach, I operate under the belief that dream jobs don't exist and that we need to change our relationship with work. And I do that by coaching my clients through how to balance work against the rest of their life and find something that is more coherent with who they are and challenge the conventional notions of what we've all been taught, like millennials especially, about what success and happiness are supposed to look like.
I think that's fantastic. As a member of the millennial generation, I know that I was told that I should, just keep on fighting, keep on climbing that career ladder, that everything's going to pay off, hard work pays off. And I got those lessons from the people in the generation above me, right? From my parents and from people of the sort of boomer generation. And I just haven't found that to be the case. So I think what you're doing is important because not everybody is thriving in corporate. And we see it everywhere, right? We see it all over social media. We see it in the headlines in national media, international media. And there's really just I think everything's kind of reaching a fever pitch when it comes to the disconnect between people who are working in corporate and the people who are leading or owning corporations. And I'd love to hear a little bit about your perspective about like what is happening out there in the world today and like what is feeding some of this, what should I call it, maybe malaise and this disenchantment with corporate employment.
Yeah, that's a great question. And there's a lot behind it, but I think what it comes down to is corporate greed. And we've reached a level of unsustainability in how the current workplace has been structured. We've been operating under similar models since like the 1980s, before we've had some of the innovations in technology and some of the globalization that have really pushed society forward. And we haven't had any change in how workers are operating. Actually, let me backtrack that. There are changes in how employees are operating because we are more productive than ever with technological innovations, but the profits yielded from our increases in productivity are not being reinvested back into workers. And this is because of models presented from the 1980s, legislation and politics from a similar era that is just like funneling more profits to the C-suite leadership. And when you have a whole populace of people, millennials, Gen Z, and even like the boomers whose the cost of living is going to be cutting into their retirement dollar, suffering.
Yep.
It's based on like systemic change at this point. People like physically and mentally and emotionally cannot work harder because we have already been working hard for our entire lives. I've been working since like before 15 years old, like babysitting and stuff. And now they're trying to say, oh, well, we got to increase the retirement age because life expectancy is longer. And you're just seeing a coming together of workers saying like, no, if we are supposed to work for our paycheck and work isn't even doing that, and it's not making any meaningful contribution to society, it's just creating more wealth for the people at the top, that's why you are seeing this disenchantment, this low morale, because it's not even disenchantment really. It's just like we see the system for what it is.
For what it is.
And we are saying no. We're saying all of this is essentially made up, and we can create a world and a workforce that works for everyone.
I really want to see that world because I know you also share a past career in the tech industry. I can speak for myself here and frankly for many others. There's a lot of frustration with tech companies. I mean, there are rampant layoffs. It's contagion at this point. I mean, and it went from, it's a pandemic era related sort of layoff boom, right? We have to cut costs because we're not making as much money. Well, guess what's happening now? Now we see record profits at a lot of these tech companies, and they are laying off the very workers who actually got them that revenue. And it's infuriating because it's like damned if you do, damned if you don't. And I know the Spotify CEO came out recently and said, you know what? Wow, we're seeing some problems after we laid 1,500 people. You don't say.
Who would have thought?
Who would have thought that people actually produce things and that could actually hurt your company to lay them off? It just seems like things are going in such a direction where there's no loyalty towards the employees who actually made these things happen for these companies. And there's just, I think, a growing sense of unease for all the people in the tech industry. And it used to be this place where it was this vaunted career path. It was this, if you go into tech, you're set. You're going to have a high pay salary. You're going to get some great, hopefully stock, but if not, maybe options that could potentially pay off if you happen to, get into a unicorn that actually does IPO or gets acquired, and they actually don't just give it all to the C-suite and the private equity firms that own them. But you thought that you were making the right move, and then I'm seeing just a growing number of people who are saying like, God, I wish I'd never gotten into the tech industry, and I think I'm one of them. So what are your thoughts, and what have you seen yourself as a past member of the tech community and in your client base? What's the tenor out there?
Yeah, very similar to what you just said, of just a general exhaustion and state of dread of like, did I make the wrong choice? And what do I do now? Like if I have to change, it very much feels like a starting over. And am I even good enough to make those changes? And after my tech layoff, I had to make the changes. I spent 11 years working in corporate social media marketing before being laid off and starting my coaching business. And social media to like anti-career coaching is not a very linear shift. So the first thing that like I would say to people who are experiencing that is, number one, it is not your fault. Like you are operating in a faulty system. And number two, like you do have agency over changing the circumstances in your life. And there's no such thing as the like right or wrong decision in your career. It is supposed to evolve over decades. And what you have now, being in the tech industry and being disillusioned by it, you have information to say, what do I want out of my career? What values within tech have been expressed that I enjoy, that I feel like I'm at my high points? And what do I feel like has been violated within my values at my low points? And how do I create a career path moving forward from that feels sustainable for who I am as a human being? Because I think, tech aside, any industry, many of us, especially millennials, go to school, go to college, you'll make it, whatever. We make decisions based on what society tells us is good. And we ignore what feels good to us. So it's like, yeah, I'll work in tech. I'll work at, Meta or one of the big tech companies. So everyone can be like, good job. That's so cool. But we hate our lives for 60, 70, 80 hours a week. Like, for what? So I think with the process that I go through with my clients, there's a lot of internal reflection involved to say like, what matters to me in my employer, in my industry, and how do I pursue that from here? What's the next best step, rather than like, I gotta have everything figured out about my career right now. Because it evolves over decades. So
it does.
Got to give ourselves a little bit more grace.
100%. And I feel like our culture is so geared towards early achievement. And there's the Forbes 30 under 30 list, which frankly I wish would be abolished. And there are all these sorts of yardsticks and benchmarks that we try to measure ourselves by. And it creates this sort of hysteria and this panic among young people. I have to get on the right course. I have to do all the things. I have to, get to the top school. I have to graduate with honors. I have to get that job. And it's just so insidious. And it doesn't stop. And then once you get to, let's say, 40, you look and you see your future and it doesn't look as bright. You start fearing like, oh, I'm a has-been. I haven't done enough by now. Like we've all these just self-imposed yardsticks that are so just damaging to everybody. So it hurts the young, it hurts the old, and it creates this environment that's just, it's not tenable at all, at least in my opinion. So I'm struggling with all of that.
Yeah, it disrupts our ability to enjoy life. I think what is missing from so many of the work-life balance conversations, and what the media gets wrong about all of this too, of like, oh, nobody wants to work anymore and we're just lazy and all of these things. It's that like we are human beings and none of us asked to be here. None of us opted into being in this society at this point in time, right?
No, we did not.
And we are entitled to enjoying our human experience and getting to live our lives. We do not have to earn it. And anybody who says that you do need to earn it and that if you are struggling, then it's a you problem is because you haven't worked that hard is like really internalizing the capitalism and the patriarchy and white supremacy and all of these things that tell us that we will never be enough and that we are never doing enough. Like we are all already enough. Our career should express the very best parts of us. And we cannot get in touch with the very best parts of us because the media is filtering all this bullshit about what we're supposed to want, what we're supposed to feel, and what we're supposed to do. So I think there's a lot of work to be done, but it starts with each of us doing those internal reflections to say like, there is nothing else that I need to do. Like I am opting out of this system that I never opted into the first place. I'm going to take care of my humanness, even if I can only do it for 5 minutes a day. That is still a massive act of self-love, resistance, revolution that we are slowly all building toward together. And if we can all do that together, that's when we start to like dismantle these systems that want to keep us stuck and want to keep their boots on our neck.
I just want to replay that over and over and over again in a loop for everybody, just so you know. That was beautiful. And I agree with you entirely. I'm a very human-centric person. I love people. I'm a very people person to my core. And I think what's so lost in a lot of these corporations is that human touch and is the fact that we are people. We aren't a bunch of robots as much as they wish we were. We are not. And we're better because we're not robots. We're better because we bring our own human experience to the mix. And that is, I think, just forever, or for whatever reason, just kind of getting missed. Like that point, we are not in there on a, conveyor belt making widgets that have to come out of certain, like this is not the modern workplace, and we need to evolve to recognize that. And we've just done, I think, a terrible job of that. And it's not our fault, it's the system's fault, right? And we have to figure out how we can dismantle the pieces of the system that got us to this point. So I love what you just said. It's super resonant. I know that you got to the point in your career where you are today, where you had enough, right? And I'd love for you to share a little bit about your evolution and how you came to be the anti-career coach, because I think it's a really moving story.
Yeah. And I appreciate that question because I would always be hard on myself that I didn't have things figured out right away. And my story has a very just traumatic past of always trying to be something that I wasn't and always hustling and working really, really hard. I was an overachiever, high achiever for all of my life. I got straight A's, AP classes in high school, graduated second in my high school class, had 4.0s for both of my degrees in college while working 3 jobs, came from a very blue collar family, one of 5 kids. And working hard was when I got the most attention and validation from the people in my life. So I internalized that hard work equals Danielle receiving love. So I'm going to keep doing that. And that eventually developed into some really just toxic work habits within school and right out of school. I had a job lined up right after college because of course I did. And that was when I was 21. So I worked in advertising at the time. And agency life is very known for a lot of hours. So
brutality.
I was pulling 60, 70 hour weeks. They had a bar built into the agency to like, oh yeah, if you work late, then like 5 o'clock, pour yourself a beer, pour yourself a mixed drink.
Mad Men.
If you stay until 7 or 7:30, then we take care of your dinner too.
Oh yeah.
So it's
yes.
The incentives to keep you working longer for shit that is not an emergency
100%.
At all is like crazy.
Tech loves that move too.
Yeah. Ridiculous. Like, oh, look at our ping pong tables. Like, we want you to live here. Now we're creating communities for people to work. Like, it's disgusting. Same.
We see you. Yeah. We know what you're up to.
Yeah. So I was very invested into that because it's like, if I'm busy, that must mean I'm important. And I want to climb this corporate ladder. Like, I'm working in the field that I went to school for. Like, I'm making it. I'm successful. And all of that came to a screeching halt when I was 23 and my mom got diagnosed with cancer for the second time. She had initially been sick when I was 11, and within 9 weeks she had passed away. And I had my laptop on the hospital waiting room floor because I was making $28K my first year out of college. And I was living in Philly, and that was not enough to like be able to cover my bills. No. And so I was like going through the worst grieving process of my entire life while still trying to work. And I got back to my desk after a few days of bereavement leave, and I was like, what am I doing? Like, I sacrificed not picking up her phone calls because, oh, I'm busy at work, or I have a networking event. I'll talk to you later. I didn't go home for family dinners because I gotta, people need me. I'm about to be on a speaking panel. Like, for what? So that was kind of the initial jolt that was like, what am I doing? Maybe I have this wrong. Maybe I just need to find an industry that has more work-life balance. Yeah. So I did. I went into higher education. It was a perfect on-paper job. And it was, look at me. Like, tattoos, septum ring, crazy earrings, crazy hair. Very much had to box myself into like very professional, like just not being able to be who I am, having to sacrifice a lot of my own. Yeah, mask essentially.
Corporate Barbie. Here we are.
Yeah, exactly. And I felt like I was like cosplaying like myself in a position. And I was there for over 5 years. And I was a single social media department, like overseeing the education, like for the entire school. And I was on call 24/7, 365. Every single vacation I ever went on, there was some type of thing that needed my attention. Even the only time that I divested was my honeymoon, and there was actually an international emergency, and I refused to answer the phone.
Good for you.
So I was burnt out. The leadership there was very protected. And very toxic. So I said, you know what? I can't do this anymore. Yeah. So I went into tech. Okay. Found a remote job and was like, all right, still social media, still education, because like I really love to empower other people and set them up for like success and fulfilling and meaningful lives. Like helping students do that through social media content. Maybe I can do it for career changers now. So was working in ed tech, started that job in August 2019. We all know what happened in 2020.
Wasn't great.
It was not great. But
still feel the burn.
We have none of us have recovered from that,
even
though it was 4 years later.
Not past it. Yeah.
No, it's crazy.
How has it been 4 years? My God. Okay.
I know.
Wow.
It's brutal.
It's nuts.
So we were business as usual and actually like amplified because now we were an online learning platform during a time where there was massive shifts to online learning.
This is your moment. Yeah. They're like, sweet, let's go.
I was like, I had this like internal, like, yes, people need me. Like, this is a great time to actually help people who are suffering. So let me pour more of myself into this. Every job, like I needed to give myself to the work. So worked hard for all of that. Company got acquired. and I got laid off.
Good times.
1 month after moving 1,000 miles away from all my friends and family in September 2021.
For the job? Had you moved for the job?
No, I just,
okay.
I was like, for personal boundaries for myself to like help myself elevate in my own life.
Got it.
But I was all of a sudden like in this new area, no support system, no paycheck. And I was like, I felt like something was wrong with me. Like I've been just in all of these positions and there has been something massively wrong in every single one. Like I thought I had found my dream jobs. And then I had that inkling of a feeling of like, wait a second, what if what I'm chasing doesn't actually exist? So luckily I had some severance and some savings to be able to like recalibrate, which I know a lot of people do not have the privilege to do. And say like, I can either move back home with my tail between my legs, get another social media job, or I can say like maybe social media marketing and corporate environment was never meant for me. Like, can I find the themes here of what's going on? And slowly over the next several years, I built out my coaching practice, my consultancy. And that is a very long story to how I got into being an anti-career coach.
It's extremely resonant and moving. And I think everybody can find a piece of that story that's super understandable and relatable to them. Right. And I'm so sorry about your mother, by the way. That's just horribly painful. And our society doesn't set us up well for grieving either. I mean, certainly work doesn't. So I'm sure your bereavement was next to nothing. And we're supposed to just get back on 3 days. Yeah. It's your mother. Come on. It's just, it's a joke. And we're human. We're human. We need time to absorb losses and feel things and get through that. Anyway, we could do an entire podcast about that alone. Yep. But so much of what you said, it really spoke to me because I have had those same feelings of I'm giving my all, I'm trying my best, I'm trying to climb this corporate ladder. And I keep finding myself in positions where there's toxic leadership or there's something entirely outside of my control, like an acquisition, right? Or a pandemic or whatever that thwarts my progression. And at a certain point, I started to wonder, am I the problem? Is there something that I'm doing that's wrong? And you look around and you see other people who've, quote, made it. And you wonder, well, why not me, right? And I, eldest daughter, high achiever, got all the good grades, went to the good school, all that stuff. I did the check. As you were talking, I was like, yep. And there just came a point when I was like, am I the problem? And I had to grapple with that. And fortunately, I've realized I've come out on the other side. I know definitively I am not the problem, but it was a really painful process to go through. And I think a lot of people are going through it right now. And people, especially those who have been caught up in layoffs, people who've been loyal participants and employees at companies for, in some cases, years, right? Who are seeing the bottom fall out of this dream that we've been sold of, getting a corporate job and having security. And so, what you just described, the process that you went through, you had to take a leap at some point and you had to say, you know what, this isn't me and this isn't for me. And you had to strike out on your own. And that takes a tremendous amount of courage. But I'm wondering if you can walk me through what some of that process was like for you when you decided you were going to bet on yourself and build a different and better future for you.
Yeah, that's a great question. I've had the privilege to go to therapy, and that has been very healing for me in understanding what my own patterns are and where they come from. There are several books and resources if you cannot afford therapy to like dig into some of those things and ask those questions. One of the books that comes to mind is like Already Enough by Lisa Oliveira, and I can send that to you if you want to link to your listeners.
Yeah, we'll link it.
Yeah, but it's a lot of like therapeutic journaling questions because not everyone can afford therapy. So I want to make sure that if anybody wants to listen and say like, let me figure out how to internalize some of this.
Love that. Thank you.
So I had to, I did that because a lot of my unhealthy patterns were rooted in trauma. And then one of the things that I did that was really, really helpful was I just looked at my career overall and I said, like, what are the highs and the low points at my jobs? Like I looked comprehensively and then each job. And like, when was I most excited and engaged? And when was I most frustrated and challenged? Not in a good way. Like when do I feel like I was not myself and anxious?
Yeah.
And I started to find some like themes, and at all of my roles, I was supporting other people in some way, shape, or form. And the low points were like when I didn't have support or autonomy to make any decisions. So I started to like formulate a picture of what that could look like. I looked at what my skills were. I have a background in marketing. I understand marketing psychology. I understand how to sell a product. So I was like, maybe I can sell people as a product in their job search. So I started doing traditional career coaching, talked to business coaches, hired business coaches, talked to job seekers for what they were feeling, and figured out where I could fill some of those gaps. And then over time, that has just progressed into like the containers that I offer now and some of the course offerings that I have now. But essentially, process of internal reflection, not letting it just exist in your head, and like allowing myself to get out there and have conversations, look what other people are doing and learn from what people need, and then go out to the market and like test out what those things are and see what resonates with people the most. Some of the pitfalls that I had was like, obviously content creation, there's a lot of people out there. There's a lot of like, oh, well, what they're doing works. Like maybe let me try and emulate what they're doing. Like, which I did that too, right? Because it's such a crowded space. But by the process of like me showing up and just figuring out what I wanted to say and realize that I could say it exactly how I wanted to, when I like internalized that and started to do it, that's when I started to see more success like online of just like, oh, people will actually want to follow me for who I am. I don't have to fake anything here like I've been faking it in corporate my entire life. Yeah, I think it's been like a process of learning and unlearning and relearning, and realizing that like any quote unquote failure that happens along the way, if something doesn't work, it's just information about 100%. What I need to do next. It's not anything about who I am as a human being. Mm-mm. And as long as I know that I am operating within my values, that I am 100%. Within integrity, and that what I am doing is enough. Like, there's nothing else that I need to reach for. Like, if I can exercise my primary values of peace and curiosity, it's been a good day. I don't have to constantly push for more. I can feel like I can look around at my life and in my work and say, you know what? It's all right. It's good.
That is awesome. I hope everyone takes that home with them today. Like, you're enough. What you're doing is enough. We don't need to have this sort of hustle culture mentality. You are worthy. Everything's going to be fine. And nothing's that serious, to your point, right? Like, failure is just information. And I love that. That's such a good tidbit, and something that I've been trying to really absorb and take forward in my life, because it's something, I mean, any sort of failure in my younger years, I was devastated by. I mean, just devastated by not getting a job. I felt like it was just a big, branded loser on my forehead, right? And and now I realize it's funny, because in tech, of course, everyone's like, move fast and break things, and failure is learning, blah blah blah, like fail fast, etc. But in society, it's not exactly it's not exactly something we're seeking, right? And we tend to just really feel it. And so over the course of time, fortunately, I've gotten to be a lot more confident and hopefully wiser as well. And I've learned to just kind of shake that stuff off and not let it define me. And so I'm happy that you also have learned the same lesson and that you're sharing it with your clients. And so the clients that you have, I'm sure, a range of people in different stages of their lives and careers, and people who might be shifting into perhaps even solopreneurship or entrepreneurship, as well as people who are working within the confines of the corporate structures at hand. What have you seen in your client base when it comes to their evolution as you're teaching them how to, well, actually, I guess I should ask, what are some of the core teachings that you have with your clients, and does it depend on the specific sort of path each of those clients is trying to take, whether that be within the corporate structures or if they're starting their own thing?
Yeah,
kind of a
question.
multi-question.
Yeah, no, so I talk to, my clients are all across the board. It's people making corporate transitions into another job. It's people who have been stay-at-home moms re-entering the workforce. It's people who are in corporate who want to start a side hustle or business and do that in a way that they are like risk averse and they can't just make the jump. Entrepreneurs who had to go back to work because their spouse died. Like a lot of every angle from a career. Like there's no such thing as a linear career path. So I work with clients from all walks of life. But in general, the process is, of course, customized to each client because their journey is so unique. But the process that we generally go through is kind of what I talked about with myself is we look at the entire trajectory of their career. We identify their professional peaks and valleys. We look at where they feel that they aren't getting fulfillment from their current job. And we also look at their life overall and how work fits into the broader picture of life. Because we talk about work-life balance as if like work is something to be balanced against life, but we need it to be coherent with life. And we need to like key piece of burnout and overwhelm and trying to figure out your career and not wrapping so much of your identity in it is having strong foundations outside of work. So what brings you joy outside of work in terms of your relationship with play and creativity and joy that is not monetized, just doing it for the sake of joy? What's your relationship with your relationships? Do you have positive, affirming, and generative people in your life, family, friends, colleagues, partners, whatever? And wellness. What is your relationship to your physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health? Because you might be at a 0 in your health meter. Yeah. And if you're at 0, any career decisions that you make are not going to be very sound.
It's so true.
So we really look at all of those things in the beginning and figure out what is the next best step. What is the biggest priority to work on now to move that needle forward? And rather than try and say like, these are all of the things that we want to do, we microdose the experience of what it would be like to step into a couple of different paths to gain more information and data about what works for them. Because a lot of times people are like, well, I'm not happy in my career. I need to go back to school. I need to get another degree and enter. But it's like, wait a second. Why don't you maybe say, let's say project management. Say you are working in marketing, you want to become a project manager, and you're like, all right, well, I'm just going to go get certified or go back to school. Well, have you talked to any other project managers before you spend all that time, money, and energy to say, like, what are the pros and cons? What does your day-to-day look like? What did you wish you knew before you entered the field? What advice would you have for someone like me wanting to make that transition? And gathering that information about what it would be like. And then saying, like, I'm interested in maybe doing this. Can I take on a volunteer project? Or can I like maybe do a small consulting gig to immerse myself in the work of what that would be so I can gather information about if I enjoy it?
I love that.
Because
microdosing.
We make these big microdose the experience.
You should
of what
trademark
it would be
that.
Like. You heard it here, folks. I'm going to trademark it. But we try to make these big life decisions, and like none of us have the money to go back to school. Like none of us want to have to spend all of that time to maybe enjoy it, because you don't want to get into another career and 6 months down the line and be like, shit, I just did the same exact thing. I'm back 100%. To square one. There's something wrong with me.
Oh God, yes. It's cyclical.
So I go through this very collaborative, internal and then implementation process with my clients to figure out what the next best step in their career is. And whether that is a non-traditional path or a traditional path, I help them with their personal branding to take those initial steps and get feedback from the world of what's working, and whether that's a resume or like an initial marketing plan for a business. Like we work on all that kind of stuff together.
That is awesome. I just think of, gosh, there are so many people who have probably had the very opposite response to, this impasse in a career. And it's like you said, it's the knee jerk. I need to go get a degree in X. And for example, I know back in the day when I was trying to figure out my own career path, I thought, Well, part of what was driving me was that whole hustle culture, that mentality of achievement that was inculcated in us from a young age. And so I wanted to have an advanced degree, to have a piece of paper that would tell me I was a valuable human being, and it would validate that I knew my shit and that I was an important someone to be reckoned with. Like, that was what was driving me. And I almost went and became a lawyer. I almost went to go to law school. And it's like, do you know many happy young lawyers? I think maybe Attorney Ryan is the only one. Ryan Steigar is the only one who I know, right? And it's
He's
just
badass.
he is badass, and he's actually the reason Danielle's here, because I heard you on his podcast, and I'm so grateful that we both know such a gem of a human. But very few people who go into the law these days who are, I would say, younger, are enjoying it. And I would have perhaps just walked myself off that cliff if I had not thought through the example of what my life would be if I hadn't microdosed the experience through actually talking to people who were doing the job in real life. I could have found myself in that very same trap. And it can be a trap to just go get an advanced degree and just think that things are going to be solved for you. Mm-hmm. No, they're not necessarily. You have to know what you're getting into. And so I think that's what's so beautiful about the methodology that you employ with your clients, because it is that, let's test here. Let's see how this feels. Let's do these little micro steps, and let's be really intentional and thoughtful about the way in which we're moving into the world and to the rest of our career, and know that it can take different paths, right? It's not a straight line, like you said. So yeah. I think that's fantastic.
The intentionality, the word intentionality is the key piece, because again, like, we are here having this human experience, and our days make up our lives. So if we aren't enjoying our days and the process of working toward whatever goal we're working toward, when we meet that goal, when we accomplish that thing, you're not going to all of a sudden feel like happy or peace or insert whatever you hoped to achieve here.
100%.
It's just gonna be like, all right, not this, maybe something else. What else is it? And then you just, all right, I'm gonna hustle toward the next thing, I guess. Like, It's this never ending process. Yeah. But when we can engage with our lives and our work in this way, it brings joy and happiness into the now. It doesn't like rely on some external factor or piece of paper or promotion or whatever to fill those voids that are within us. It's kind of like, no, like I know what I'm going to figure out, what I want and need. And I know that sometimes I'm going to have to make trade-offs, because nothing in life can be perfect, but I understand and I'm willing to make those trade-offs because I understand what the benefit is.
Yep. Absolutely.
So yeah, that intentionality piece is everything. And too many people are operating on autopilot. And I just kind of want to elevate people's relationship with themselves and their own humanness, so we can also see the humanity in others and like create that more human first future of work that I think we all are craving right now.
Absolutely. And I think work is a bit of an addiction for a lot of us too. And we can kind of not do the important inner work of getting to know ourselves by hiding behind, well, I'm just going to grind, right? And so I think I really like the aspect of having to look inward. And I think that far too many of us just think like, oh, we're going to keep on building towards this external validation, this pillar of achievement. And we don't take the time to get to know ourselves and get to know what we care about and what we want out of life. And I think far too often it takes some sort of a loss to really ground us in the fact that this is all we have here, right? Yeah. Like, we only get one shot at these things, right? And and so I think it's a really important thing that the message that you're spreading is really critically important. You know, I wanted to ask you a little bit, because this podcast obviously is about the experience of getting older, and the value of age diversity. And I know that there's been a lot of chatter out there when it comes to generational differences in the workplace. And, you know, some of it, frankly, is quite humorous, and some of it is, I think, really damaging. And I guess I'd like to get your take on what you're seeing, because you've been on some cool media appearances lately, and you've talked a little bit about some of the misconstruals of Gen Z and of millennials. I mean, I think you and I are both millennials, so I think we would be seen in the eyes of many as snowflakes who are entitled or something like that. So why is that wrong?
Oh, man. That's a loaded question. I think From what I've learned, when people point fingers the way that they do, it's usually a projection of the way that they feel about themselves. And it's easier to do that than to do the work of looking inward. And I think there's some value in the generational conversations of like what boomers have had to endure versus other generations. There are things that we can learn from the boomer generation. And there are things that they can learn from us. But I think one of the biggest gaps is that prevents that from occurring is when the media paints this picture that we're lazy and we don't want to work, that we are entitled, we just want to like participation trophies. And the easy response to that is like, well, hey, like boomers, like you gave us those trophies. Like,
didn't you teach us this stuff?
You taught, like, yeah. So like, I think there's some bad, like my dad is like one of the youngest boomers, and like I've learned the value of hard work from him. I enjoy working hard, but I've also been taught that I have to like struggle to earn anything with that language, with that internalized stuff. So I think that for boomers to like stay long term with an employer, that's wonderful if that's what has worked for them. And it's not this boomer versus Gen Z thing that the media paints it to be. They want us to point fingers at each other rather than looking at corporate greed and the influence that corporations have on our systems and laws.
Exactly.
Right. So I think it's real, like, that's why the wealthy own media outlets. So like, it's not hard to, I mean, it is kind of hard, I guess, for people, but not hard for me to see that, it's like, hey, look over here instead, look over here, like distractions. Here we go. So
nothing to see.
Like, I think if the way they worked for them, fantastic. They had incentives like pensions. The American dream was real. They're the last generation that the American dream was real for, that they could afford a house, multiple cars, vacations for families with multiple kids on like one income per year. That is not the reality for young people today.
It's not. That's why it drives me crazy when I hear them calling us lazy or entitled or any of those things.
And I think it just displays just a lack of human empathy. And empathy is a key component in emotional intelligence. And I think that's why there's also so much conflict in workplaces, because you still have like the boomer generation in senior leadership positions, and there's a commitment to this misunderstanding rather than saying like, well, let me hear how things are happening and let me see how I can be part of that change and support you. I do have boomers in my messages like that are like rooting us on, like there is support happening.
Yeah.
But
we all want the same things.
Yeah. And I think, Gen Z is surpassing boomers in the workforce this year. And with the cost of living is going to start eating into boomer retirement dollars. I think 3 times as many boomers are working right now as they were 35 years ago or something like that. Because, you work all your life and it's still not enough.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it is crazy. So I think to answer your question, the media wants to paint this picture that doesn't exist and cause a divide to prevent us from looking at the systemic things that are really affecting us.
Yep. I think that's quite accurate. Want to get your hot take on some pretty timely topics in the media and in the world generally of work. So quiet quitting. What are your thoughts?
Hell yeah. If you aren't being paid, if you're not being paid a certain, quiet quitting, okay, another media term, is rebranded to being paid for the work that you were hired to do.
Yes, exactly.
And if you have to do more, be compensated fairly for it.
What a concept. What a concept.
It's like, it's just working. Salary law, the overtime laws that are like yesterday, right?
Yes,
2 days ago.
Yeah.
We're seeing some changes.
We're seeing some changes. I love it. All right, lazy girl jobs.
Love Gab and love the lazy girl jobs trend. There is no such thing as laziness.
I love it. I think that's fantastic.
Laziness is a manufactured term to keep people hustling and constantly productive and neglecting their rest. And the entire trend is to help workers reclaim their rest and their work-life balance.
I'm here for that. So here for that. The 4-day work week.
Absolutely. We have studies that definitively show that employee engagement goes up, employer retention goes up, healthcare costs go down. So, we have the data to prove that it can work, and it's long overdue. Like, nobody needs to work 40 hours a week with the technology that we have.
Love that. What about the 4-hour work week?
Tim Ferriss.
Yeah, a little throwback to Tim Ferriss.
Yeah. I honestly would love that, and I would not know what to do with myself.
I know, imagine that. I listened to, have you heard the podcast If Books Could Kill?
Mm-mm.
It's my absolute favorite podcast. It's fantastic. It is an excoriation of all those airport books that you see everywhere, like the like personal development and whatnot. And one of them that they take on is Tim Ferriss's book, because I'm going to send you the episode after this, but basically Tim Ferriss's model includes essentially exploiting others to have only 4 hours to work. So I'm like, cool, man. I mean, I'd love to only work 4 hours, but like, how is this happening for you? Like, why are you a multimillionaire?
Yeah. So, in the world of work that I would create, like, nobody can, if there are still people working like 40, 50, 60, 70 hours a week, then like
no one
there's
gets
some type of imbalance of power happening. You know what I mean?
Slight bit. Just a slight bit.
If they're working that much and you still can't afford basic human necessities, but there's someone who has more than they could ever possibly need for this lifetime and 20 lifetimes afterward.
Yeah, there's a bit of.
But with AI and stuff, like I think that we have an opportunity to take the working load, like working hours, off of people.
Yes.
But historically, we've seen that when we have these innovations that we create more time, we just fill that with more work. So I think,
why do we do this to ourselves?
Internalized capitalism.
Yes, what's wrong with us?
Yeah, but I think the 4 hour, like with the question that I go to immediately, and this is something that I'm actively working through as an entrepreneur, as a recovering perfectionist, is like recovering, like creating strong foundations outside of work for myself. So like I have other things to look forward to, so I can work less. But I will work more because work has always been my default. So if I can create new hobbies and get my hands entrenched in something different, then I can work 40 or 30 or 20 or 10 hours, then just because I have built a life outside of work that I can look forward to.
Which, yes, we should all definitely do that. But you're also, at this point, you're working for yourself. You're not just handing over all of your hard effort to, some CEO who's going to lay you off next month. So it must feel different, right? To be doing the work you're doing and actually seeing the impact of the lives that you're changing, frankly, with your coaching clients, which is so cool.
It is the most rewarding work that I've ever done. And like, I feel it in my bones that this is the work that I'm meant to be doing. So I'm going to keep following it and see where it leads. And because career paths aren't linear, that could be the structure that I'm currently in. It could be going to corporations and helping them. It might evolve and take shape into a lot of different things. And then I'm open to all of it.
Well, I know I speak for many when I say I absolutely can't wait to see where you go and what happens next for you in your career. I think what you're doing is critically important, and it's a message that needs to be heard far and wide. Where can people find more of you?
Yes, you can find me across social at I'm Danielle Roberts, or you can find my website at danielleroberts.co.
Beautiful. I will send people there in the show notes. This has been so much fun. I respect and admire you so much and think what you're doing is really, really cool. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.